Hello everyone, my name is Joe Archino, and welcome back to This Is Why We Stand. You are about to listen to the story of Vincent J. Speranza. I hope you find the words of this American hero as inspiring as I did.
I was born in 1925 in New York City, one of 8 children in a very happy family. And I grew up during the Depression. Times were tough, but as far as we were concerned, everybody in the neighborhood was in the same boat, and so there was no envy of anybody having a better time than we were having. And we grew up in a well-disciplined family. My father came from Reggio Calabria in Italy, and my mother came from Sciacca, a village in Sicily. My father continued to say all of his life that America was the most magnificent place in the whole world because there was nowhere else in the world where a man could come here with nothing, only a willingness to work and build a family and have a home and a car and his kids educated by the government and so on. My father and I think most of the others were the same way. The most patriotic people we had in America at that time. And when the war started, he lined up his 4 sons. My kid brother was only 12, and Rocky was 14, and I was 16, and my older brother was 20. And he said, boys, they won't take me because I'm too old, but I expect my sons to. And we said, we know, Papa, they won't take us till we're 18. He said, I know, but I just want you to know how I feel about it. And that stayed with us all of our lives, hopefully, because he said to us, this nation must not fail. That we felt we led our lives in that mode, that whatever we do, we should be sure to make sure that this nation does not fail. That's what stayed with me, especially in battle when people ask you, what were you thinking about? Well, there was a lot of things you were thinking about. One of the major things you thought about was your father saying, hey, this country must not fail. And that helped. It gave us a motive, it gave us a motivation, it gave us something to hang on to as to knowing and understanding why we were there. There was no question in our minds about the war. And so I was a normal kid, grew up in the neighborhood, went to school, never gave my parents a hard time or anything. And when 1941 rolled around and the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, we were made to realize quite early, hey, the country is in trouble. Around this time in 41 and 42, the Germans had taken most of Europe, and the Japanese were almost down to Australia. It looked bad, and we couldn't wait to get in, but they wouldn't touch us until we were over 18. As soon as we graduated from high school, a few months later I was 18, and we had to register for the draft, and we were not allowed to volunteer. They said that there's a quota system for your location, and when it's called, that's when we let you in. We were dying to get in, but I had to wait until November of 1943 before the Army would take me. And I took to the training like a duck takes to water. We just loved it. We were preparing ourselves for what we wanted to end up doing, defending the country, and we gobbled up the training. But it was infantry training at Fort Benning, Georgia, the infantry school. And when we graduated from there, they assigned us to a line outfit. I was sent to the 87th Infantry Division at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And there one day, while the outfit is supposed to be getting ready for training maneuvers in Tennessee, jungle training in Florida. When the hell are we going to get into the fight? One stall after the other, it seemed like to us. And one day they said there was going to be a demonstration, and they sat us out in the field, and 347s, C-47s came out of the sky. The doors opened, and we saw these guys throwing themselves out of the airplane, and little white pieces of thing holding them, and they come down to the ground, and double time off the field, and line up in front of us. The bright, shiny jump boots, and only paratroopers in those days were allowed to blouse their pants and boots. Shiny silver wings, and the lieutenant, the captain comes by and says, "This is the United States Parachute Corps. We're looking for a few good men. You have to have had all of your infantry training, and who wants to volunteer?" And man, we were. But then we hesitated for a moment. Wait a minute, throw yourself out of an airplane? And then he says, and there's $50 extra month jump pay. And they took 7 of us, sent us back to Fort Benning, this time to the jump school. And there again, I can't emphasize enough what kind of magnificent training we got. When we came out of jump school, we were ready to take on the whole damn German army. And they sent us up to Fort Shanks, New York, and there on the Queen Mary, this is November now of '44, we went overseas to England and then to France. And I was assigned to the H Company 501 Regiment of the 101st, who had just come out of Market Garden beat up. They'd lost 3,000 men, they let a lot of their equipment and so on. They were supposed to get rest, rehabilitation, replacements, like me, for the next 90 days. But emergency intervened. Nobody knew it, neither British intelligence nor American intelligence knew it, but the Germans had saved up 25 divisions. There's 18,000 men each division. 9 of those divisions were Panzers with the new German tanks, the Mark IVs and the Tiger Royals. And their plan to turn the war around was to go from Germany through the Ardennes, the old attack routes, to to Antwerp, which was the port of entry for all of our supplies, all our guns, ammunition, food, and so on. And had they captured our supplies, it would have given them what they wanted, denied us, and it would have divided the Canadian and British armies in the north from the American armies in the south. It would have changed the war. If they had gotten there, it would change the war. Their problem was they had to funnel through the Ardennes. There was a little town here called Bastogne. Bastogne was a transportation hub. It was a little village, but it had 5 roads and 2 railroads, and the track that went through it. And Eisenhower sent the 101st Airborne Division to Bastogne and said, "Halt." Now, the division was not prepared for battle. They had lost the new men. The new men were not given any combat training. They had very little food and ammunition on hand. And more important, we had not been issued winter clothes. We still had the summer jackets and pants. And no hats, no gloves, no galoshes to keep your feet dry. But it was an emergency. They sent us up the way we were. And when we were first told we're going up in the cover, we said, "You're crazy, the ground's frozen, we'll all break our legs." And they said, "No, you're not jumping, you're going up in the truck." And all I could think of was all my parachute training, all my jumps and parrot practice, and this and that. And I'm going into my first combat in a truck. But it was a horrible truck ride. All of the stuff is in my book. I wrote a book. The
What's the name of the book?
book is called Nuts.
It's a good title
By
when you get to
Vincent
the
J.
rest of the
Speranza.
story.
Well, during World War II, that was one of the most famous phrases in the world.
Absolutely.
It's what McAuliffe said to the Germans when they asked him to surrender. And we got up there, and didn't know where we were. The temperature had dropped. By the way, the trucks that we went up there were open trucks and so on and so on. And we were so jammed in tight, you couldn't move, you couldn't change position, you couldn't sit down. Those of us that were standing up had to stay up and so on. It was a miserable truck ride. And by the way, they were taking chances. Had the Luftwaffe been out that night, we were sitting ducks, a whole room, a string of trucks out on the open road, driving with it. For speed, they had to keep their lights on and so on. Emergency lights anyway. At any rate, we got there just one day before the Germans hit. Just long enough for our officers to set us up and dig holes I guess the artillery back there is setting itself up. The Germans were going to come from along the Longville Road from the east, and the 501 was right there in the center of that section. So we took the first hit, and the temperature had dropped. Of course, we don't know it at the time. Later on, they told us it was 10 below, 12 below, 18 below one night, and so bad that even the rifle bolts froze. And that first morning, this is December 17th now, that we got there, the 18th, the fog is all the way down to the ground, and as the fog begins to rise, tanks pop out of the woods, and all of a sudden all hell breaks loose in the field, the artillery, mortars, and the German infantry starts up through this field. And they had just smashed 4 American divisions. They were cocky. They looked like they were, feeling good about the war again. And they expected, just like the 4 divisions that they had smashed through, the same kind of thing happening there in town. They didn't know it was the 101st Airborne in there, by the way. Their intelligence said we were still 130 miles south. But the frontal attack, as it comes across the field in the snow, tanks up front, and tanks were firing point blank into the foxholes, and if they hit, the guy disappeared. His rifle went floating around up in the air there and coming down. But nobody quit. Nobody surrendered. Nobody ran. We just ducked down the damn hole. We let the tanks go by, and when the German infantry came up behind them, we slaughtered them. That first day, that first morning, the snow turned red with their blood, not ours. And it looked like a complete rout. When the tanks realized that the infantry's not behind them, they have to turn around and go back. On their way back, our artillery opened up and destroyed, I don't know how many of them saw it. The first battle was a complete rout for them. And we were happy. You can't say happy, but we were satisfied that we had conducted ourselves as good soldiers and refused to surrender in the face of that kind of attack. Then, of course, we turned around and looked at the number of our guys that were laying all over the place. We won that battle, but it cost, my friend. It cost. And so they never tried a frontal attack like that again. The next day, they slipped around on both sides and surrounded us. And in that surrounding us, they captured the field hospital. All the beds, all the blankets, all the medical equipment, and the morphine, and so on. They shot the medical personnel, and they kept the doctors to serve their troops. One doctor escaped, and one nurse got into Bastogne. And for the entire battle, that's all we had in the way of medical. We had one doctor and one Belgian nurse. And the movies show you another. Now there was one doctor and one Belgian nurse. And The wounded couldn't be put any place except the only two buildings that still had walls were the church and the seminary across the street from the church. And we just took the guys and threw them on the floor of the church. And some of us went through the houses pulling drapes, curtains, bedspreads, whatever we could find to wrap the wounded in. The temperature was dropping even lower. And those of us that had 2 blankets donated one to the wounded. But it was a pretty sad situation. The doctors operated with candles, candlelight, and all of his medicines and medications were captured. And we lost a lot of guys that, had there been a decent hospital for them, they'd have made it. But that was the situation. We were surrounded and cut off, and the doctor did what he could. And those of us who could help by donating our blankets and so on, helped to wrap those guys in. Well, the second day after that, my friend, his name was Joe Willis, got hit in both legs, and they brought him back to the church and put him on the floor, wrapped him in, and when I saw him, he had a curtain wrapped around his neck. It was the most pitiful thing you ever saw. But when my sergeant sent me back to the town to get some supplies, batteries, I think, for the radios, I went to look for my friend. And I see him laying on the floor of the church. I said, "Hey, Joe, how you doing?" He said, "Nothing. I got a couple of pieces of shrapnel in the leg. I'll be out of here tomorrow." I said, "No kidding." He said, "Yeah, I'll be out of here tomorrow. Don't worry." I said, "Well, that's great, Joe. He was my assistant machine gunner." And Joe, I got to leave. Anything I could do for you before I leave? He says, "Yeah, go find me something to drink." I said, "Joe, where the hell am I going to find you something to drink? We're surrounded. There's no supplies coming in here." He said, "Go look in the taverns." I said, "Joe, the taverns are all punished. Go look in the taverns. You might get lucky." Now, it's snowing, not like gentle flowing snow. The wind was like it was cutting in the snow. And artillery is dropping in all around the church there. I'm out there slipping around, going down the road looking for a tavern. And the first tavern I went into, all broken glass, nothing. And the second tavern I went in still had a bar, and when I pulled the beer handle, beer came out. And I said, "Oh, well," I looked around for a glass, a bottle, or something to put the beer in. There was nothing. So I took off my helmet, the same helmet you use in the foxhole there. I swished a little snow around in it. I filled it up with beer. Back to the church. I said, "Hey, Joe, I got some beer." And he said, "Oh, beer." So he sits up, and I'm feeding him beer from the helmet. "Hey, give me some of that. Hey, give me some of that. Hey, give me some." I was like an old mother cow there feeding all these guys a mouthful of beer. And I ran out. And Joe says, "Go get some more." Jesus Christ, go get some more. Okay, I go back down, fill up the helmet. As I come up the road, right off outside the door, a shell landed nearby, knocked me down, and I spilled half of the beer. I didn't get hurt, though. I got up and took me. And this time when I got back to the church, standing in the doorway like this was the regimental surgeon, Major Walkman. I'm a private soldier, but I'm a PFC. He says, "What the hell do you think you're doing, soldier?" I said, "Sir, bringing aid and comfort to the wounded." He said, "You stupid jackass, don't you know I got chest cases and stomach cases, and if you give him beer, you'll kill him? Get out of here before I have you shot." "Yes, sir, and put that helmet on." But I ran like hell back to the foxhole before he changed his mind. And, or I was already freezing. Now I'm wet and freezing, and I could write another whole book about for the next 4 hours what the guys did, taking my clothes off, pounding them with a rifle to get the water up to try to keep me from freezing solid. At any rate, it was one of the incidents that happened during the war. You know, there were a lot of incidents like that. I forgot all about it. Oh no. 65 years later. By the way, when I came home from the war, I was 20 years old, and I literally looked myself in the mirror, and my mother was, you know, when I was a kid, I used to read about the World War I guys that came home, shell shock and this, and nightmares and back flashes and so on. And I looked myself and I said, you are not going to be one of these guys that comes home with back flashes and nightmares and going to take all this crap and cutting people in half with a machine gun and so on, and put it all back here and lock the door. No more soldier. You're not going to be an educator. You can find a nice woman, get married, have kids, and that. And for 65 years, that's exactly what I did. I found a nice woman. I got married, kids, grandkids, even great grandkids. And I didn't know anything about these celebrations that were going on. I didn't know anything about the reunions and so on. I joined nothing. I said I was not a soldier anymore. I was an educator. But in 2009, that's 65 years later, I meet a woman. My wife had just been taken away and put in a nursing home full-time. You know, I was taking care of myself at home, but then she had a relapse and a coma and so on. They told me I had to put her in permanently. And, you know, I was an old man sitting around, 85 years old, that's not sitting around waiting to die, that's all. By accident, I meet this woman. She's got a heavy accent. And she says, and I said, Madame, do I know the French accent? She said, no, Belgique. I said, oh, Belgium. She said, yes, why, do you know Belgium? And I said, yeah, bombs, bullets, and snow. That's what I know about Belgium. She said, oh, you were there during the war. I said, yeah. She said, and you have not been back? I said, no. She said, Monsieur, you must go back. She said, the people of Bastogne have never forgotten the 101st Airborne Division. She said, there are monuments to you all over town. The people are dressed. They dress up in American uniforms and they reenact the battle when you were there and so on. She said, if you go back to Bastogne and you wear just a little pin that says 101st Airborne Division, you don't buy a drink or a meal the whole time you're there. I said, that sounds pretty good. But I decided, well, yeah, maybe I ought to go back one time and see the old battlefields. And my daughter agreed to come with me. And we get to Bastogne. Now, we don't know anybody. We had no game plan. We had nothing. All we were going to do is rent a taxi and drive out of town and see if I recognized anything in the terrain. And by accident, again, we meet this big Dutch paratrooper, and we start talking. And he says, you were here during the war? I said, yeah. He said, oh, man, I said, where have you been? There's so few of you left. We want to honor you. Who were you with? I said, H Company, 501. He said, you know, we studied the war. He said, we know every place where everybody was, where the Germans were, where you were. He said, I will take you to where H Company was dug in on both sides of the road outside of Mont. I said, no kidding. He said, yeah. And he takes us out there, and he says H Company was dug in here, 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 here on the ridge. And then he looks me in the eye and he points to one. He says, and that was your foxhole. I said, come on. How the hell do you know that was my foxhole? He said, because your company commander, Captain Stanley, when he did his after-action reports and so on, he put a diagram where he put his automatic weapons. You were the only machine gun in the 3rd platoon, right? Yeah. MG, you. Now you have to picture this. You're 85 years old. and somebody is telling you where you're standing right now, 72 years ago, you were here, a 19-year-old kid with a machine gun waiting for the first German attack. And all the stuff that I had put back here come back and just hit me right in the face. I even heard the artillery noise again and so on. And when you're 85, you don't have the control you used to have. And so I fell apart. Whatever the story was, my daughter pulled me aside and she said, Marco, my father's seen enough. Let's go back to town and come back tomorrow. Right? So they said, okay. And Marco and the other guy with him, Johnny Bona, who was a Belgian tank commander, I asked them if I could take them to lunch, and they said yes. At lunch, I ordered 3 bottles of wine. I said, hey, I don't like the way I'm feeling. We're going to change the mood here. And the inevitable, you put 3 soldiers and 3 bottles of wine together, we start getting noisy and loud, and everybody's looking, and we embarrass the hell out of my daughter. But we start telling stories. Johnny Bona tells about Belgian tanks. Marco talks about fighting in Bosnia and Kosovo and so on. And when it was my turn, I told him this beer story that I just told you. And while I'm telling the story, they're going like this. You were the GI who brought the beer and the helmet? I said, yeah. They said, you brought into the church, the wounded guys, you gave them a beer? I said, yeah. They said, man, don't you know you're famous in Europe? I said, what the hell are you talking about? They said, waiter, come here. And the waiter comes over and they said, bring us 4 bottles of Airborne beer. And the waiter comes back with a tray and he's got 4 bottles of beer and 4 little ceramic bowls in the shape of a GI helmet that they serve it in. The helmet says Airborne. And the label on the bottle of beer shows a paratrooper with a helmet full of beer going like this. Nobody thought that was a true story. Everybody thought that was just a myth. It was a nice story, but it wasn't true. We can't believe it. The guy who did it is sitting right here. I said, yeah, maybe I should get a cut on the beer, right? And they said, I don't know about that. And the rest of it is like a fairy tale. When I went home, they gave me 6 bottles of beer to take home with me. And when I got home, my local newspaper heard the story. They called me up and they said, could they come and do it? Yeah. And they took a picture of me with the bottles of beer. And they put that picture in the newspaper. Somebody from the newspaper picked it up and put it on the internet. 9-point-something million hits. I got 2 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, French Legion of Honor, the Dutch. I got 1 million medals. What does anybody want to know when they talk to me? Tell us the beer story. I am better known for what I did with a helmet full of beer than what I did with my machine gun the whole war. And I served 144 days in the combat unit. And the story went wild, and for the first time, I became aware of. I got an invitation from the 101st Airborne Association to join that. I joined that, and then I heard of it and other people, and before you know it, I'm fully involved in the veterans thing. But as an independent, I paid my own way everywhere, so that I just went to where I want. I wasn't locked into a tour where you got to go here, 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 and here. At any rate, for the end of the war, after we got on the 24th and 25th, the Germans must have heard that Patton was on his way, and so they doubled and tripled the artillery attacks, and they attacked morning, night, but no matter what they did, they couldn't move us. We lost more and more men. We were down to 1 K ration a day, and McAuliffe's artillery, which was saving us from the Germans had 1,000 tanks. We had 73. What saved us was McAuliffe's artillery was placed so that he could bring all the guns to bear on one spot. So wherever they attacked, all of his guns could hit that, and he destroyed their tanks as fast as they came on. And on the 23rd, the sun came out, and finally our planes came and dropped supplies. So now we had food and ammunition, but no winter clothes. We cursed a little bit about that. Whatever the story, on the 24th and 25th, Christmas Day, they threw everything. There was a shell landing every 9 seconds or something, that they tell us later. And didn't do them one bit of good. On the 26th, Patton came in, broke the sector, we got all the wounded guys out, and then we went on the offensive. On the 5th of January, I got hit, sent back to a British hospital, 6 days and 5-day recuperation leave, but then right back to the outfit. And we were sent, we had 2 big fights in the Bastogne area there, in Houffalize and later on in Haguenau in northern France, and then they sent us to Austria and Czechoslovakia, and then Bavaria, Germany, and it was there that the worst experience of my life took place. We were told to get off the trucks and go through this field and woods that they thought there were Germans in there, and that we had to clear out the woods. But when we got out there, we formed a skirmish line, moved forward to fix bayonets, and there was nothing. The foxholes were empty, but as we kept walking, we noticed a smell, and the further we went, the stronger the smell got, and you gotta try to imagine this scene. All of a sudden, we're in a clearing, and like a panoramic view of a filthy concentration camp, 12-foot high, barbed wire fences, two big gates open. In the middle of the company, there was a big, deep hole, and a bulldozer sitting there. And at the far end, thrown like garbage, not laid out in any way, a big pile of human bodies, all sizes, little ones, big ones, and so on, that they were going to just push into that hole. And on the right-hand side, the ovens were still smoking with the bones in the oven. On the left-hand side, there were cubby holes, and there was a person in each hole. Half of them dead, half of them moving. And all of them looked like skeletons with skin on it. There was nothing. They were... You got to remember, we were kids. We were 19-year-old kids. By that time, we were good, tough combat soldiers, but we had no life experience. To see something like that the first time just drove us crazy. And then when we were told later on that those people had done nothing, revolt against the government or that, only because they were Jews. They were just rounded up and thrown into this and starved and beaten until finally they push them in a hole and try to burn the evidence. And whatever little respect we had for the German army and the German people disappeared that day. And for the rest of the war, it was illegal, we knew, but I don't know about anybody else, but our outfit didn't take any more prisoners. We shot the bastards on sight. And to this day, even talking to you about it, I get emotional all over again. The they did not have the right to say, just because I don't like your religion, you're a dead man. And you can live and you can die, and you can live and you can die. And that's God's prerogative, not man. We could not believe one man could do this to another. And that impact there just, for us, May the 8th, the Germans signed a surrender, and we were stationed near a little town called Ramsau, near Hitler's Eagle's Nest. We were up in the Eagle's Nest when the war ended. And we thought we were going to go home now, but no, we had to stay as occupation until they could bring new troops from the States in to take our places. And it took from May, at the end of the war, to November before they had brought enough troops over. And one thing that happened, when the war ended in May in Europe, the Japanese war looked like it was going to go on another 3 or 4 years. The closer we pushed the Japanese toward their home islands, the tougher they got. And the Japanese war looked like it was going on. The Army broke up the 101st Airborne Division. They dissolved it after the war was over in Europe. And they took all the high point men, men who were married, had kids, and so on and so on, from the 101st and the 82nd both, and sent them home. And all the young kids, they put in the 82nd, and they told us there was going to be a practice jump. And we said, what the hell for? It was over here, and what do we need? And a practice jump with full field equipment. We know what that meant. They were going to take us and fly us direct from France to Panama to Saipan for the invasion of Japan. And we weren't too happy about that. We thought there was enough in here, and besides, we'd never survive another combat mission. But in August, to everybody's surprise, the atomic bomb, that ended the Japanese thing, and it ended the need for us to go to Japan, so they didn't fly us out. And in November, near the end of November, they brought us home. I got a ride on the Queen Mary, it was a troop ship then. And within 30 days after we got home, we marched in a big parade down Fifth Avenue with the 82nd Airborne. About 3-4 days after that, we were sent to Fort Dix for discharge, and that was the end of the war.